Hi, welcome to my channel. My name's Rosie, for those of you who've not been here before. I wanted to do a series on making informed decisions in pregnancy and when it comes to your birth. When I was pregnant with my first baby, there was we, we had the excitement of being pregnant and then went to the midwife and there was just so much paperwork. I remember sitting on the sofa at home because we had a visit at home, and there just seemed to be so much paperwork and so many things to think about with regards to testing and our family history. With subsequent pregnancies, my middle one was very medicalized, but with my third pregnancy, it was really noticeable to me that there was lots more concentration on the testing and getting the tests done than anything else. And we live in a pretty risk adverse society. We want to make everything as safe as possible. And sometimes, especially when it comes down to pregnancy and birth, the over testing can actually result in over treatment almost, or creating tests that can cause anxiety and stress and completely spoil the pregnancy. Another thing that's becomes a problem is that the tests that are given are guidelines from each hospital, each area you live in. So you might have one test in one county and not necessarily in the other, and the way that they are treated and the outcomes are different due to how the hospital has decided those guidelines. And those guidelines aren't always based on evidence-based research. Sometimes it's just what the hospital has always done, or they are a reaction to something that has happened previously in the hospitals. Sometimes parents have something's happened to somebody's baby and they've pushed to have more tests done. The wonderful attempt to prevent that happening to other parents, but actually it becomes a blanket guideline that can adversely affect people and women's experiences of pregnancy and birth unintentionally. So because there's so many different tests now offered, midwives' time is quite limited. It tends to be that they just go through the tests, blood tests, blood pressure tests, and urine tests, for example, and the scans, without actually talking about the choices behind them, about the pros and the cons of what they're testing for, and what the outcome will potentially be from a positive test. So what I wanted to do is create a series where we can have a look at each test, look at what the problem is, how common it is, what the treatment is, the pros and the cons, what if you do nothing, what are the alternatives, and how that will affect your pregnancy and even your options during birth. That way you have got enough information that you can go away and make an informed decision on whether you want or don't want that test. So the tests are offered at certain times in relation to what they're testing for, and that's usually because abortion is still possible at this time. The anomaly tests for various genetic disorders, for example. Some women do want to make a decision about carrying on their pregnancy with looking at the results of those tests. For others, they're not worried. They don't want to know. They prefer not to have the tests. Some people prefer to have to know what the outcome is so that they can prepare themselves for the future. So there's all sorts of different reasons why women and their families want to decline or accept the tests, but this is not always kind of talked about and accepted when the guidelines for each hospital is being made. So most of the guidelines, as I said, are made for populations. There's a lot of tests that they do for everyone without really looking at the fact that some women in some circumstances are not going to have that issue come up. It's just everyone's tested as a population rather than it looked at as an individual basis. One really important thing that's never covered is how having a test and having the result can really impact your decisions on where and how you birth. A good example is in the Group B strep test. If you're tested positive, then that means that you are more likely to be encouraged to have an antibiotic intravenously during labour, and that's going to restrict how much you can move around, and those antibiotics also have an impact on the baby when they're born, and that could be a lifelong impact. So it's really important about having a long think about whether you do want to take the test, and if you do, what you want to do with that information when you get it back. So that is the reason for this little series, and there's quite a lot of things. Some of them are tests, some of things are I want to talk about folic acid and folate at some point as well. So it's an exercise, and nutrition. So there's quite a few other things that aren't necessarily the tests, but just information that you need to be thinking about while you're pregnant. So my aim is to give you the information and to let you know how the effects of a positive outcome will affect how you're treated during pregnancy, how it will affect your baby while you're pregnant, how it will affect you while you're pregnant, how it will affect your birth, and how it could potentially affect your baby as well. It can be really easy for interventions to really change the outcome of your birth and go from a positive birth experience into a negative or even traumatic birth experience. And this is something that I really want to be able to help women avoid, is a traumatic birth experience. And in order to do that, I think everyone needs to know what the consequences are of doing the testing is. And you may still want to go with the testing, and that's fine, but at least you know what to expect, what's going to happen along the line when you've got the test, and knowing and being able to carry on making those decisions is going to mean that you have a more positive birth. And that's the important thing, that your birth is a positive memory for you to look back on. So next week I'm going to look at Group B strep. I'm looking forward to that one, and I hope to see you then. Meanwhile, do take care,